The plates were still wet when she dropped the fork into the sink. Not slammed, not tossed, just dropped, like her hand forgot it was holding something. Then silence. Her back stayed turned, but I could see her watching me in the window reflection, waiting to see if I'd noticed. I had. Of course I had. "You're awfully quiet," she said. I dried my hands on the same kitchen towel she always complained was too scratchy, and hung it up like it mattered. "I have something tonight," she added, her voice light, like she was trying on a tone that didn't quite fit. "A thing." I nodded. "Okay. It's a date." There it was. 3 words, whispered into the hum of the fridge like they wouldn't echo. She finally turned to face me. That same look. Chin tilted, lips rehearsed, arms folded. Like she was bracing for a speech, an explosion, a breakdown. But I didn't give her one. I just stepped aside, opened the cabinet, and pulled out the chipped coffee mug her sister gave us when we moved in. The one she always said was ugly but sturdy. "I figured," I said, pouring myself decaf. "You've been dressing like you're on your way to someone else's life lately." She didn't respond. She just stood there, caught between pride and panic, trying to decide which one would save her faster. But neither did, because I hadn't even started yet. She sat down without asking if I wanted to talk. That was new. Usually, she'd walk away fast, heels echoing down the hallway like punctuation. But not this time. This time she stayed seated at the edge of the kitchen chair like she was unsure if she still owned the space. I could feel her watching me as I sipped from that chipped mug. Her fingers drummed against the table in uneven rhythms. She was searching for control, reaching for it like it had just rolled off the counter. "So," she started, "you don't have anything to say?" I looked at her, really looked, not like a husband looks at his wife, but like someone trying to remember a dream they stopped believing in. She was wearing the blue shirt, the one she used to wear on Sundays when we cooked together. Except now it was buttoned one too high, tucked too perfectly, matched with lipstick she never wore at home. "You look like someone else," I said. She flinched. Barely, but enough for me to see it. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she replied quickly, too quickly. "We haven't been okay for a while. You don't even notice me anymore. You just exist next to me." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I'd rehearsed those same words in my head for months and never had the courage to say them out loud. It was strange hearing them thrown at me like knives I'd forged myself. She crossed her arms. "Why aren't you yelling? Or asking who he is? Or anything?" I set the mug down carefully, like I was afraid the sound would shatter something more fragile than ceramic. "Because I already know," I said quietly. Her eyes widened. Only for a second, but it was enough. "I saw the text 2 weeks ago," I continued. "Didn't say anything then. Figured I'd give you time to remember who I am without having to remind you." She blinked. "That's why you've been so calm," I offered. "Detached? Like furniture?" She looked down. "No," I said. "Not detached. Just done pretending that I'm not watching this house rot from the inside out." Silence. Again. This one longer. Heavier. "You knew," she whispered. "And you didn't stop me. I was hoping you'd stop yourself." And that was the truth. I had. I gave her space. I gave her softness. I gave her every excuse to come back. But she'd already left, not physically, not officially, but in all the ways that mattered. And now that I'd spoken, she looked smaller. Not out of guilt, but because the performance had ended and she wasn't sure who she was without the script. "You said you had a date tonight," I said finally, standing up. "You should go." Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something. An apology, an excuse, a deflection, but nothing came out. Just breath. Just silence. And that silence said everything. She didn't move. Not at first. She just sat there, gripping the edge of the table like it might drift away without her. The silence between us was no longer peaceful. It was tight, stretched, something brittle waiting to snap. I walked past her slowly, without brushing her shoulder, without looking back. I went into the hallway, pulled on the jacket I hadn't worn in weeks, and opened the drawer by the front door. The one where we kept batteries, receipts, and that tiny velvet box she hadn't touched since we lost the baby. Behind me, I heard her voice, finally. "So you're just letting me go?" I turned slowly. "No," I said. "You already left. I'm just letting the door catch up." Her lips parted in disbelief, like I'd slapped her. And in a way, I guess I had. She stood then, her voice suddenly louder, harsher. "You knew for 2 weeks and didn't say a word?" I said a lot. You just weren't listening. You were busy pretending this house had mirrors that only showed your side. She took a step toward me, then hesitated, maybe thinking that proximity would fix the emptiness. But it didn't. It never had. I didn't sleep with him, she blurted, eyes wide, as if that detail could rewind time. I let that hang for a moment before answering. Was that a promise? Or just a delay? She didn't answer. She couldn't. So I opened the velvet box and held it out between us. Inside was her grandmother's locket. The one she gave me to hide 6 months ago because she didn't want to wear it until she felt like herself again. She probably forgot it even existed. I didn't forget. I held it out to her. This is yours. I figured you might want to wear something familiar, in case you get lost on your way back. Her jaw trembled. You think I'm making a mistake? No, I said softly. I think you made it weeks ago. Tonight's just the part where I stopped cleaning up after it. She reached out to take the box, then stopped. Her hand hovered like she didn't know whether it was hers anymore. Are you going somewhere? She asked. I've got things to do, I replied, slipping the box into her palm. Places to be. People to stop being for. Her fingers closed around it like it burned. And I walked out, not slamming the door, not storming, just leaving. For now. Because this wasn't the end. Not yet. But she didn't know that. Not until the next morning. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. I sat in my car down the street, watching the lights in our house blink off one by one like tiny endings. The kitchen went dark first, then the hallway, then the bedroom, our bedroom, though it hadn't felt like ours in a long time. I should have driven away. I told myself to. But there's a strange comfort in heartbreak when it's still familiar, like a bad song you can't stop humming. So I stayed, just to see what she'd do. At around midnight, the front porch light flickered on again. She stepped outside in that same blue shirt, holding her phone, pacing. Her voice was low, too faint to catch, but the tone was sharp, impatient, nervous. Then she got into her car and drove off. No hesitation, not even a glance in the rearview mirror. She didn't know I was parked right behind the line of trees across the street. She didn't know I still noticed everything. She was gone for exactly 2 hours and 13 minutes. I counted. The rain started halfway through, and by the time she returned, her hair was a mess and her lipstick was gone. She looked different, not guilty, not even happy, just hollow, like something inside her had finally caved in. She went inside, turned on the light, and stared at herself in the hallway mirror for a long time. I could see it through the window, that reflection I'd watched 1,000 times when she used to fix her hair before work. But this time, she wasn't adjusting anything. She just stood there, hands gripping the edge of the dresser, breathing like she'd run a marathon she didn't win. I left after that. I didn't want to see more. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who sits in the dark, waiting for the proof he already has. So I drove until morning, parked by the lake, and watched the sky turn into a pale, washed-out blue. I thought about how quiet our house would be without her. How silence can be heavy when there's no one left to fill it with small lies. When I got back around 8, her car was still there. The lights were on again. Through the window, I saw her sitting at the table, holding the velvet box I'd given her. She wasn't crying, just staring. And beside the box was her phone, face down, like she couldn't look at it anymore. I walked in slowly, not wanting to startle her. She didn't even flinch when the door clicked shut, just whispered, "You left your ring on the counter." I looked down at my hand. She was right. I had. But before I could say anything, she turned the phone over. The screen was unlocked, the message open, the name glowing at the top. It wasn't who I expected, not the guy I thought she'd been seeing. It was someone else entirely. Someone who made everything worse. Someone who made me realize she hadn't been lying about wanting to feel wanted. She'd just been looking in the wrong places. And that's when I knew this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about something deeper, darker, something she hadn't told anyone. Yet, at first, I couldn't even speak. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. The name on her screen blinked back at me like it was daring me to say something. And it wasn't who I'd expected, not even close. It wasn't some coworker from her office or the gym trainer I used to joke she had a crush on. No, it was someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Someone who used to matter. Theo, my brother. Older by 2 years, charming in that too easy way that always made people uncomfortable if they watched too closely. The kind of guy who wore expensive cologne even to the grocery store and spoke like he was always 5 seconds ahead of the conversation. We hadn't been close for a while. Not since he borrowed money he never returned and made a mess of a birthday dinner that ended with him punching a wall over a joke about his ex-wife. I thought I'd cut him out clean. I really did. I hadn't seen him since Christmas, hadn't called, hadn't replied to the random "miss you, bro" texts that always came at 2 a.m. But there his name was, at the top of her messages. I stepped forward. "Is this some kind of—" "No," she said too fast. "It's not what you think." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the only sound that didn't sound like a scream. "You sure?" I said. "Because it looks like what I think. And considering you were out for 2 hours last night and came back looking like you got hit by a train full of regret." "It wasn't like that," she snapped, standing now defensive. "He reached out to me months ago. It wasn't supposed to turn into anything. We were just talking." I could feel something rising in my throat, a burn I couldn't swallow. "Just talking," I repeated. "To my brother. Behind my back. While sleeping in my bed." "We didn't." "Don't." I cut her off. "Don't insult what's left by pretending it was innocent." Her shoulders slumped. For the first time, she looked small, like a person who couldn't escape the thing she'd built around herself. "He said things you didn't," she whispered. "He noticed things. Asked questions. Made me feel like I wasn't invisible." I stared at her. The woman I married. The one I used to make pancakes for when she was too tired to get out of bed. The one who made playlists for long drives and used to hum under her breath while brushing her teeth. "You were invisible," I said softly. "Because you disappeared a long time ago." She didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised. I walked to the window and looked out, not because I was avoiding her, but because I wasn't sure what I'd do if I looked at her again. My hands were shaking. My heart felt like it was trying to outrun something I hadn't caught up to yet. "Did you sleep with him?" Silence. That was enough. "I need you to leave," I said. "Today." She turned toward me slowly. "Bennett." "I'm not asking," I said. "I'm telling you. Pack a bag. Call whoever you want. I don't care. But you can't be here when I get back." I grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and slammed it harder than I meant to. It echoed like a gunshot. As I got into my car, I saw her through the front window, still standing there, clutching the velvet box with the locket inside, the one she said didn't matter anymore. But now she held it like it was the only piece of herself she still recognized. I didn't go far. Just parked 2 blocks down, where the neighbors had that rusted-out camper no one ever used. From there, I could still see the edge of our driveway and the top corner of our kitchen window. My hand hovered over my phone more than once, fighting the urge to call Theo. Not to yell, not even to demand an explanation. I just wanted to hear his voice and know if he'd flinch, if there'd be hesitation, guilt, anything real. But I didn't call. He didn't deserve that much from me anymore. Instead, I sat in that car for nearly 2 hours. The rain came back, harder this time, and I watched as she moved through the house like a ghost. Packing, stopping, sitting, unpacking, staring at the same sweater for 15 minutes like it might apologize to her. Eventually, I drove off. Not because I was done watching, but because I realized what I needed more than closure was clarity. I needed to feel the decision I was making, to really own it, not just survive it. I found myself at a diner we used to go to in our early days. They hadn't changed the wallpaper. Still that ugly green and yellow pattern like something out of a waiting room in the 70s. I sat in the back booth, ordered coffee, and watched couples around me. Smiling, bickering, sharing bites of pancakes like trust still lived somewhere in the world. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But something colder had taken over by then. Not rage, not spite. Just stillness. The kind that comes right before the earth shifts. By the time I got back, it was almost dark. Her car was still there. Inside, the house was cleaner than it had been in months. The couch cushions were fluffed. The shoes at the door lined up like she'd tried to arrange the chaos back into something respectable. She was in the kitchen, wiping the already clean counter with a trembling hand. A single duffel bag sat by the door. She didn't look up when I entered. "I wasn't sure if you meant it," she said, her voice small. "I did," I replied. I walked past her and opened the fridge. Everything was still where I'd left it, down to the old jar of jam neither of us liked, but never threw out. "I don't have anywhere to go," she added. "Not yet. I can stay with my sister eventually, but she's out of town until Sunday." I shut the fridge slowly, turned to her. "Then you can stay." She looked up, surprised. "What? You can stay? Until Sunday," I repeated. "But you sleep in the guest room." We don't talk unless it's necessary. You don't ask me how I'm doing, and I won't pretend to care how your day went. You're a guest in this house. Nothing more. She blinked fast. Her hands were tied on the rag now, knuckles white. Okay, she whispered. And one more thing, I added. Leave your phone on the table every night before you go to bed. I don't want it ringing, buzzing, or lighting up this place after hours. If you need to text someone, do it before 9 p.m. She nodded slowly. Is this punishment? No, I said. This is grace. I went upstairs without waiting for a response. I heard her footsteps retreat to the guest room. Quiet. Careful. Like she was afraid to wake up something that had already died. Later that night, I walked past her door and saw the light on underneath. I paused, listening. No phone. No crying. Just silence. Good. Because the next morning, I wasn't going to be the one crying. She was. And she wouldn't even see it coming. I didn't sleep that night either. But unlike the night before, it wasn't rage that kept me awake. It was the weight of a plan finally forming. Not revenge. Not theatrics. Just the kind of surgical precision that comes after you've bled all the emotions dry and what's left is focus. Cold. Sharp. Quiet. At 3:27 a.m. I got out of bed and went downstairs barefoot, careful not to make a sound on the wood floor that creaked near the vent. Her door was closed. Her phone was on the hallway table, just like I'd asked. Screen down. No notifications. At least not anymore. I sat at the kitchen table with a pen I hadn't used in months. One she gave me when we signed our mortgage papers, back when we thought roots meant safety. And I started writing. Not to her. Not even about her. I wrote a letter to myself. Or maybe to whoever I was before she started calling me boring in front of her friends. Before she started comparing my silence to someone else's voice. Before she decided love could be traded for attention like a coupon about to expire. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't bitter. It was surgical. By morning, the letter was folded in thirds and left on the kitchen table. It didn't have her name on it. That was intentional. I didn't want her to think it was a goodbye. It wasn't. It was just truth, finally said without fear of her smirking through it. I went upstairs, showered, shaved, dressed like I hadn't in months. Dark jeans, clean button-up, cologne she once said reminded her of bookstores. Then I grabbed my bag and left the house without a word. I knew she'd read it. And she did. She called at 8:43 a.m. I let it ring. Then she texted, "Who's this for?" I didn't answer. The next text came 12 minutes later. "Are you leaving for good?" Still no reply. At 9:20 a.m., she sent a photo. The letter, unfolded on the table, her thumbnail visible at the edge of the page like proof she'd touched something sacred without permission. Then, "Does Theo know you talked to her?" Her. That's when I smiled. A small, private, brutal thing. Because she had figured it out. Finally. Not the affair. That was already dead weight. But the part that mattered now. Because I hadn't been out driving aimlessly the other night. I hadn't gone to the lake, like I said. I'd gone to see someone. Someone who knew more than she realized. Someone who had been on the edge of her life, mostly unnoticed, but quietly watching. Someone she never thought would speak up. And that someone was about to tell me everything. I pulled into the parking lot of the cafe, where the windows fogged up with breath and gossip. She was already waiting. Hair tied up. Nervous hands around a chipped mug of tea. She looked up when I walked in, and her expression said everything I needed. She was ready to talk. And my wife's secrets? They were just getting started. The cafe smelled like burnt coffee and rain-soaked coats. I spotted her immediately, Clara, Theo's ex-wife. We hadn't spoken since before their divorce, but when I texted her 2 nights ago, she replied within minutes. She looked nervous, eyes darting toward the window every few seconds, like even being seen here was dangerous. When I sat down, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. She just slid her phone across the table and said, "You should read this." The messages were there. Weeks of them. My wife and Theo, talking about me like I was a chore they both forgot to finish. Laughing about what I didn't know. Making plans. Then slowly, inevitably, arguing. Lines about guilt. About what they'd ruined. About how he doesn't deserve this, not after everything. Theo's last message was from 3 days ago. "I can't do this anymore. Tell him. He deserves the truth from you, not me." I sat back. It didn't sting the way I expected. There was no explosion, no cinematic wave of anger. Just release. The kind that comes after months of holding your breath. Clara watched me carefully, as if I might break the table in half. Instead, I just said, "Thank you," and pushed the phone back toward her. She looked confused. That's it. That's it, I said. You've both been trapped in the same lie, and now I'm not part of it anymore. When I walked out of that cafe, the air felt lighter. I didn't drive home right away. I stopped by the lake instead, the one where I'd sat after she'd gone out that night. The clouds were clearing, and the water looked almost silver. Peaceful. I realized I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't even want to confront her again. I just wanted to reclaim the quiet parts of myself she'd drowned out. By the time I returned, her bag was gone. The house smelled faintly like lavender detergent. She must have done laundry before leaving, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of habit. On the kitchen table was the locket, the same one I'd handed back to her days ago. Inside, a small folded note in her handwriting. You were right. I was lost. I hope you find peace faster than I did. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not bitterly, not out of spite, just quietly. I placed the locket in the drawer, washed the mug she'd left behind, and opened the curtains wide enough to let the sunlight spill across the room. It hit the walls, the counters, the floor, places that hadn't felt warm in too long. That night, I cooked dinner for one. No awkward silence. No forced conversation. Just me, the radio humming low, and a small flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory. Not revenge. Freedom. And when I finally went to bed, the rain had stopped completely. The house was still, calm, alive in a different way. I realized she was gone for good. And somehow, that was the first thing she'd ever done for me that felt like love.